Oh, sure enough, now we're recording.
We're recording. This is Pax Sinclair, and this is Author to Author, and we're talking where we talk to romance writers and discuss all things romance. My guest today is Michelle Deerwester. I was going to ask you how you pronounce your last name.
I know, it's a miserable last name, isn't it? The first part, the left of the hyphen is Deerwester, the right of the hyphen is Dalrymple, and the Dalrymple is ancient Scottish. Like it
Dalrymple.
never changed on the boat. There's actually a province under Ayr, if you go to the lowlands, that's called Dalrymple. There's like a small city and province there. So
Oh,
just
all
south
right.
of the airport.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, see,
Yeah, Dalrymple.
okay. I will. Anyway, Michelle. Okay, is an award-winning author of two successful series, the Glen Highland Romance, which is a historical Scottish romance, and Men in Uniform, a contemporary cop romance. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm excited that we're going to be discussing today Men in Uniform.
So I'm excited to talk about it. It's a fun series.
Okay, so why don't we start off with you telling us just a little bit about the series?
Well, the series is about I kind of invented the Tustin Police Department. There's actually a city in California called Tustin. It's a smaller city in Orange County, Southern California. And I decided it's a place I'm kind of familiar with. I have some family out there. I used to live near there. So and it's got enough of a small town feel that I thought it would work well. But it's around all these big cities and close to LA where you can still get some really graphic crime. You can really get some, dynamic, police interactions. So that's where it's set. And then it's the different, officers within that police division. And so that's the flow of the story. And then all of the officers throughout the books kind of interact and engage with each other. So after you read the first book, you've already met some of the characters that are coming up in the second book. And then in the second book, you meet some characters, and those are coming up in the third and the fourth book. So you kind of have a little bit of an introduction to the characters if you read the whole series, but you can also read each book as a standalone. So it's just a kind of engaging sort of series that way.
Oh, okay. Well, I know you started writing your historical series first. And so this cop romance is actually the second series.
Yeah.
And so I was when I found out that you did write a historical romance series, I thought, I mean, why did you go from that to contemporary, especially not just contemporary, but a cop series?
Yeah. Well, I will admit that, a lot of people have said, you gotta be careful with your branding and everything. So I decided, well, I'll just use my initials for the Men in Uniform series, kind of separate it a little bit. But I've always been entranced with like Men in Uniform, firefighters, the military, police officers. There's a sort of, luxuriating pull about that, an enticing sort of, excitement that can come with someone who's, a man in uniform for women. And then I decided, and some men as well, there's men who like men in uniform, so I decided, I have my husband who's a police officer. He has these great stories. And the more stories he came home with, the more I'm just like, I got to write these down. This can't be real. This seems almost impossible. But it was so like exciting, when he would tell me these stories. And I'm like, if I find him exciting, I'm sure other people would too. And so that's kind of what got me started on it, was let me, I was really hesitant though. I don't, I'm a historical fan. I do read some contemporary, but not to the degree that I read historical. So I was a little nervous. I'm like, I don't know, how prepared I am for this. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to write these stories, because it's not, what I'm as familiar with writing, but why not give it a try? So that's what I did.
I noticed when I was reading Night Shift that the first scenes were pretty gritty. And I was thinking, is this really a romance? So, of course it was, because I read the rest of it. But why did you begin that romance or that series with such gritty scenes of it's a police officer, yeah, while he's on duty?
Yeah. And one of the biggest reasons I did that is that when I would read other like series or other stories and the character was an officer it didn't seem to be at the forefront as much. It was just kind of a casual sort of reference. And my experience from being around my husband and his friends, other police officers, that's something that's very prominent in their lives. Like they don't not tell you they're police officers. That's, you know, they have a bearing, they have, you know, a certain sort of, you know, presence about them. They talk about it. And so I wanted to really add this element of realism. So like the readers would know these are police officers. It's not just something casual to help move the story. These are actual, like real stories, real police officers. This is what they really do. This is what it really looks like if you're, you know, into the boys in blue. This is what it really looks like. And then I like to think that it kind of shows who these characters are and why they behave and make decisions the way they do and what motivates them, that it kind of shines a light on that. So that way, if they are reacting a certain way or they are saying a certain thing, like the reader has a better point of reference for where that comes from. And then it kind of gets the blood racing a little bit, maybe not for the same reason as romance, but it does. It kind of, you know, heightens that. And so then when they do fall in love or they do find their happily ever after, you're even more excited because this person who does this dangerous thing or who is involved in this dangerous, you know, event can find, you know, they do get their happiness, they do get their rewards. So I think there is something to that as well.
I think you did a really good job of
Thank
showing a cop in the romance. Sometimes we read some of these romances and they kind of mention it and they might throw in some cliches just for us to know that the person is a police officer.
Yeah.
But since you're not a police officer yourself, what was the most difficult part of writing it? I know you said your husband is a police officer.
Yeah. Some of it's like doesn't really align with like a good romance or happy ever after. Like some of it's like threatening or insulting, or the material that, you know, even though like my husband would come home and say, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And I'm like, oh, that would be really good in a story. But there's this one facet that is really problematic. Or so I have to think, okay, if I want to write the story, how do I change that so it doesn't come off as I'm writing like a thriller or something like that? You know, I have to, at the end of the day, these are romances, and I have to make sure that, you know, the reader does get that feel, you know, hopefully sooner as opposed to later. But and there's just some stuff that I wouldn't feel comfortable writing about in a police romance. And so that's probably the hardest thing, is like, if I have to filter something out, like what can I do instead, or how can I filter that out and still keep kind of the sort of the grittiness of this is what it is to be a police officer, but not lose my readers because it's, you know, something that's, you know, not appropriate or has a, you know, a significant like trigger warning or something like that. So I try to, it's finding that balance. So that can be a real challenge when it comes to these cop romances.
You know, that's interesting that you touched on that. I was wondering, because of the female characters, how do you approach them? I mean, do you draw from your own experiences, or is it your own personality?
A little bit it is. So in book one, you have Rosemarie, and there's the subtle implication that she's, you know, not just your standard, you know, like white female. She is a runner, and, you know, she's got this silky dark hair. And then we learn a little bit later that, you know, her parents are involved, and that maybe she's, you know, mixed race with, you know, an Asian American mother and a kind of, you know, Caucasian father. At least that's this, but I didn't want that to be the focus. But at the end of the day, I also don't want everybody just envisioning, you know, themselves, like especially out here in California, you have so many different people of so many, I mean, I'm a bit of a mutt myself, you know, and so I wanted to kind of reflect that. And I wanted to give each female character like her own kind of personality a little bit. And so Rosemarie, I did model after myself a little bit because even though I'm not part Asian, I am part Native American. But I had to, you know, twist that up. But I am a runner, so I thought running was a good option. We have a large dog, so I figured that would work really well. We just gotten him. That's why the dog was in the story because we just got a giant dog, and so that served as a really good kind of, and it really helped kind of fit her personality of who she was and who she wanted to be and everything. So that's why we did that. And then for some of my other characters, you know, they're based off of either, you know, people I know or what I just see like from my own environment of, you know, people who live in my area, or people who, like, you know, I teach at a bunch of different schools. So I'll see, you know, students of mine and I'll think, oh, that person has a real neat look. I want to write that into a character. So even something as simple as that, people that like when, I'm at the, something as simple as the grocery store, you get such an eclectic collection of people out here from all different backgrounds, all different, races, colors, creeds, nationalities, gender, identity. I mean, you pick it, it's out here. So that's another reason I tried to be very cautious about who I was writing about, because I didn't want, there to be any expectations about who a police officer was or who a police officer would date or anything like that. I wanted to kind of make it more engaging, a little more diverse, but it's hard because I don't know everything with regards to diversity. And I actually had to go back into Night Shift. And there was a word I used that I found out 2 weeks ago was something you probably don't want to use. And I'm like, no big deal. We're going to fix it right now. And so I fixed it. But it's always a little bit of a learning curve and a learning process. But at the end of the day, like in California, you meet all different sorts of people. And so I'm trying to write that into the story, like who you would expect to see. If I'm getting pulled over, who am I going to see? And so, not that I get pulled over that much, I try not to.
I think what it is, I'm also a California writer, but you're in the southern part of California and I'm in the northern part.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask. I thought so.
Yeah, that's what's so unique about our state is that there's so much diversity. We don't even, it's just here.
Yeah, and it doesn't register as much.
Sometimes to convey that to other people outside the state, it's a little different.
It can be difficult. Yeah, it can be a different process.
Like he goes, well, that person was this, and I go, well, you do know they all can see each other. That's what I keep telling people. They can all see each other. Yeah, they can all see each other. So if the diversity is here, but nobody says, oh my God, you are. That's just not the way it happens. We've been this melting pot forever.
Yeah, and
this is the way we are. This is California life.
Yes. When I was first married to my first husband, he had lived in the very rural part of Michigan for most of his life. He did a brief stint doing some training in the military, but he was never deployed. So he never really went anywhere, and he was like, when his training was in like North Carolina or something. So still very rural. So he hadn't been exposed to a whole lot of people from a bunch of different diverse backgrounds. And so he moved to California when we first got married. We were like, babies. And he was shocked because he would see people who were obviously of, an Asian descent, Asian American or Chinese American or whatever, but they spoke like Valley girls. And he could not fix that in his head, because if he had ever met somebody who, had that appearance, he would expect them to speak with a very, very heavy accented English as though they were just from, they were an exchange student or something. And so that was the biggest, and I'm like, I don't understand why you have such why you're so fascinated with this. He's like, no, you understand that. It's like, they shouldn't be speaking that way. I'm like, okay, they can speak any way they want. They've lived in California longer than you have. You have an accent.
True. There might be second, third generation.
Yes.
So they're going to sound like they're from.
They're going to say, he goes, you talk funny is the problem, actually, coming from the Midwest. So yeah, it's difficult to realize, because out here we just accept certain things. We can write things a certain way, not realizing that other people from other places might have different, understandings or expectations or perceptions. So that's always a little tricky.
Yeah, I think so too. Being a California writer, I think sometimes that's the back of my head. Is it gonna fly with the Midwest or the South? And I go, oh, well, whatever.
That's why
I keep telling this is a California story.
That's why the historicals are so safe, because people have certain, and during that time that was okay. I can get away with that stuff and not have to worry about it.
But yeah, we could go on and on about that. But
right?
It's true. At least I know. Well, usually the other California writers, I said the same thing. Just from where we are, it's a different world.
Yes, it's a whole different world.
It's a different world, and we try to write about it. And I'm hoping we're just educating everybody.
That would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
Anyway, so you know what I wanted to ask you about?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about the types of male characters you like to write about. I mean, do you like the alpha males? Do you like the, everybody has the kind of a particular male when they're writing, the guys in their series.
I probably wouldn't say alpha males, because I had someone comment that they expected more of an alpha male from their police officer. And we live in an era right now where that probably wouldn't fly very well with some of the issues with regards to police violence and, some of those concerns that we've had. And like I said, my experience, limited though it may be, just via my husband and our community with his officers, I don't see it quite as much as an alpha male as kind of this is going to sound kind of funny, but an empowered protective male, where they still encourage their girlfriend, their wife, their spouse, their mate, whoever it is, to, they don't expect them to stay home and, do dishes. They don't expect them to fall. They expect them to have a brain. They expect them to, engage and be able to give their opinion and, be even more of an alpha female, if you will. They're much more open to that. And so a big part of what I'm writing is I'm trying to, kind of showcase that. They are very protective though. And there is a little bit of the kind of the alpha that comes with that seems very alpha. But other than that characteristic, I wouldn't necessarily call them like the billionaire style alpha male that we see in some contemporaries. I like my men to be, very kind of open-minded, maybe a little bit broken, not fully. Like the first in night shift, he's a little bit broken. And in day shift, because of the new baby, I think, Ramon Garza seems a little bit, you can see that he's like on a precipice. A little bit, but I like to, have my male characters be very complex. I don't necessarily like to assign them just one sort of trait. And especially with throwing the word alpha with police officers, that can be a bit of a sticky wicket sometimes. So I try to, but they are very protective. That's why they do what they do. And so I do try to make sure that aspect comes out pretty well, that, I wouldn't say overly protective, but there is a little shade of that where they're a little more protective than maybe, someone whose spouse is like, I don't know, like a librarian or something, they're definitely a little more, and they can be a little aggressive over certain things, especially as it either relates to their job or something they are protective about. So I try to showcase that, but not keep it on that's they're an alpha male all the time. They can tend to have alpha male characteristics. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
Well, when as a reader reading your books, the males were all protective, which I liked,
Yeah.
because of course you want your mate or whatever to be protective of you, of course, because that's why you're partners. And I just thought they all had a heart, and I love males with a heart.
I like that. Thank you. Yeah.
Because I love strong men, protective men, not stalking.
Yeah, but protective, yeah.
But I always like to read about males with a heart, and every male in your stories all had a heart.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think it worked out really well. It kind of set the tone. Night Shift set the tone with that because, you see how he was over his dog. There's even the comment that he was more broken up over the loss of his dog than the loss of his wife. And that's one thing that you always like everybody, well, I'm going to generalize here, but, we always love to see those pictures of the firefighters holding the puppies or the kittens or something, and the nice, bare chest with the abs and all those muscles. And they're holding a little kitten or a little puppy. And you're just like, oh, they're hard and soft at the same time. So I think at least that's what I try to do. I try to kind of, they're hard and soft into the stories. And, sometimes they're more successful than others. Sometimes they're softer, sometimes they're harder. But I like that idea of having a heart. That's definitely something that I try to do.
Yeah, because sometimes you will see the alpha males and I don't know, it's hard. And I know that there's types for everybody and, that they are drawn to. But I guess I'm drawn to the strong ones with a heart, but I love your male characters. I also like the aspect that it feels like these men are actually out there, that these are real men that you're talking about. And if I drive down to Tustin,
to the imaginary police station down there on Main Street.
Yes, I feel, and that's another test of a good series when someone is writers creating characters. If I think that this person is living somewhere. We're both fans of Outlander, and I think these characters are so real that you feel like that they really do exist.
Like you could map out. I like that you can kind of map out where they are, where they've been, and even if she's inventing something to go with that, you can almost visualize it. It seems like it's really real. And I actually do that when I'm writing about Tustin, like on the streets they're on. I'm like, okay, does that intersect with that street? Yes, it's there, but it's too far past the highway. Where else does it and I'll change whole street names, and I'm not going to move a highway, I'm not, but I'll change the name of the street to actually better reflect like the map. So I always have a map of Tustin pulled up on the back, okay, that's actually more of a, commercial area, so that wouldn't be there. But this has a strip mall, so that would work, so that's what I do to kind of, because I want people to have that sense of, you feel like you could go down to Tustin and, see Officer Garza or Officer Dames there and,
That's
say,
the way.
hey, I read about you.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I was reading the books. I felt that these people were actually, if I drove down there, I would down south, that I would actually see these people. So
That is awesome. I appreciate
yeah.
that.
So, you're, you currently have 4 books in this series, or is it?
Yeah, I have 4, and I'm working on book 5. It was going to be a different one, but then I started writing one of the other stories that I have on deck, and so it was supposed to be, let's see, it was, I think it was Holdover was the one that I was supposed to be working on, but then I shifted gears, and so the one I'm working on now is called School Resource Officer, and it's because especially, being in California, you've probably seen this, where there's a lot of police officers that are attached to schools, or they specifically do the beats around the schools, the high schools, the middle schools, and the high schools, keeping a lookout for people dealing drugs, for, pedophiles, for all that kind of stuff. And so that one is one that I'm focusing on, because I had like an idea. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so going to do this. And so that one kind of took over. So initially the other one will come out, but it's just going to be a little bit later. So, but book 5 of School Resource Officers in the works.
Okay, so we'll be waiting for that one. So
Yeah,
that's what I
I'm
was going to
hoping
ask
to
you.
get that one, and then the Holdover. I'm hoping to get both of those out this year. So fingers crossed.
So do you know how many books that you plan for the whole series, or when you plan a series, do you know exactly there's going to be so many, or is it kind of organic, and it just,
I had a list.
One comes from the next one?
So they do, well, with the, I'm checking I had notes somewhere, and I'm trying to find my notes because I'd written them all down. I sat down with my husband and I'm like, okay, how many books are going to be in this series? And so we came up with like a giant list of how many books would be in the series, and what we could name all of the books, and everything else. So I can't find my notes offhand. But I want to say we came up with about 8 or 9 more, not including School Resource, where my husband was just throwing out like possible, like the different positions and the different areas of focus and expertise for the different parts of the police department. And so we were just writing them all down, and then any ideas that went with that. Now, of course, I can't find my notes, but anything that, which I'm very disconcerted about right now.
That's okay. So you can give me an estimate. I won't hold you to it. So
yeah, but there's so I'm just kind of, I'm, throwing it out here now, but there's about, I think like 8 or 9 more in addition to School Resource Officer, where they're focused on different, like the motorcycle officers or the canine officers, or, sergeants or detectives. There's some different ones where there's like volunteers that are tied to it, but they work heavily with the officers. So there were a whole bunch, I have swing shift. And so there was just a whole bunch of these different like types of positions or types of like structures within the police department. And so we came up with a list just kind of off the top of our heads, and then what possible stories could go with them. So I have like the basics for like I said, about 8 or 9 more on deck. So I'm hoping to eventually, within the next 2 years, to kind of finish up that whole set. Right. And get at least those ones that we had, those next, we'll say 8. I think it's about 8 total, to get those next 8. And I think that's including School Resource Officer. I'm drawing a blank right now, but to get those 8 out. And then my husband, he's like, I'll, start paying attention and seeing if I notice anything else, or if I come up with anything else. So there might be more than that, but right now there's about 8 more that we're looking at.
That's good.
So
that's good news for your fans.
I know, right? So
yes.
But some of them I'm completely like, like a patrol officer who's on like the night shift, like that I get, but I'm like, okay, I know nothing about like some of these other officers, and the like. But one of the ones that will probably after School Resource Officer and then Holdover, probably the next one after that is going to be K9, because I actually have a point of reference. If my car broke down once in the middle of nowhere, and this is before I met my husband, and it was a cold night, it was super windy, and I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to walk home in this? I was using my cell phone, but my husband at the time was not answering the phone for whatever reason. and it just kept, either I was getting like back when you had busy signals or he wasn't answering. So I'm like, what is going on? So I was so frustrated and I'm trying not to cry. And then a cop pulls up behind me, lights flash, and I'm like, oh, now I'm going to get a ticket for where I'm parked because I wasn't parked. My car was broke down. Turns out he kind of had an idea of what was wrong with the car. He's like, do you have someone to come pick you up? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, why don't I give you a ride home? And he was super nice, nicest guy ever. And I'm like, okay, so but I got to bring my car seats with me because I have 2 little kids. And he's like, oh, he goes, I don't know that we can fit those in the car. And it's a giant SUV. And I'm like, why not? And he goes, I'm a canine unit. They got 2 seats in the front. Everything else is for the dog. Like there was no, I had to put the car seats on my lap while I drove.
Oh, gee.
And it was interesting. I'm like, there's no other seats. Like you don't even have like just like all the way in the bed, like all of it's for the dog. It was bizarre to think. So there's a dog in back just kind of looking at me while I'm driving home, panting on me. So it was, yeah, it was a fun memory. So I'm like, okay, I'm definitely going to try to somehow, maybe that's how he'll meet,
I think so. That's a perfect romantic moment. It really is.
Isn't that cute? So I thought that was kind of funny. So, and whether or not there'll be car seats, I mean, why not have a single mom who's got to get this car seat home and you can't fit it in the canine unit?
Oh, that's going to be so cute. I thought that would be fun.
So that's kind of what's on deck for that one. And then, so I have definite stories for the next 3, and then I got ideas for the remaining like 4 or 5 after that. So kind of see how things go from there.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask you because it just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Will we see a female officer?
Yes. My husband and I actually, but I'm kind of torn a little bit. Because I don't want to feed into stereotypes, but my husband said this is unbelievably common. People would be surprised if it might not work if you don't do it. A lot of female officers are lesbians. And he goes, so most likely you would need to write a lesbian romance because a disproportionate, I can only think of 1 female officer who is with a man. All the rest of them are lesbians. He goes, they're with their girlfriends. And I'm like, oh, or their wives. And so I don't know if I'm up for doing, even though I'm an ally and I have, family members, my daughter is part of the LGBTQ community. I don't know if I have enough expertise to be able to write sufficiently. I mean, I guess I could just sit down and interview and talk to people and have them review it for me, but I would want to make sure that like that is so above board. I would have to really do my due diligence on that one. And I don't know if I'd be able to do that as successfully as I would want, or if my readers would be turned off because they're expecting, male-female romance and suddenly there's a female-female. So I don't know what I'm doing with that one yet, but it's there. It's already, it's got, the tentative title. It's in, I can't remember what it is offhand, but it's there. It's in my notes and I'm trying to figure out what to do with that one to give it, to do it the right way.
It sounds like you have a lot of people that you can rely on to talk about it. And
yeah, that's the fortunate part.
You can, I mean, he's not saying that there is no officers that they're all lesbians. So, and there are a lot of writers that they'll do lesbian stories and they'll do male stories.
Yeah,
I mean, I know a lot, and that's kind of part of it. And it's, I was talking to some of my other writer friends about it. And, sometimes they will do a story, but so you're right.
On top of the
carefully read. Yeah.
That's what I have to do. I'd have to do some major research. I'd have to talk to these. And so that's my biggest problem is like, do I, feed into that? I also don't want to, propel, stereotypes that maybe I shouldn't, but, my husband's like, he goes, it's almost what people would expect. But then I worry because I'm like, okay, is this what my readers would expect? So there is that back and forth that so right now I'm just kind of playing with that and trying to figure out the best way to progress with that one.
It all depends. You may think about just your readers because they may want to know, female officer, but you can do that. So
yeah,
as I said, I would think about your fans and what you're comfortable with.
A good kind of cop out, no pun intended. Funny. I'm sorry. I'm a big fan of puns. Would be to do something, and this is something I talked about with my husband, like, would this be, is to do something where maybe she's bisexual and that she had been in a lesbian relationship romance and, she was looking for, the next serious relationship and it just happened to be a man this time. So that's also something I could look at doing. And that way it would kind of maybe bridge both sides. But I don't know, like I said, it's just, I'm tossing ideas around, trying to get a feel for how that would work. But yeah, I do have 1, maybe even 2 female officer stories in the kind of on the back burner for that.
Maybe
So
it's
fingers
just
crossed.
like a little sub genre from
Yeah.
the women of the
Yeah, right? So the women in blue. So yeah,
yeah.
it
Oh,
is,
that'd be
but it is there.
wonderful,
It
huh?
is there. So I'm struggling with how to work that one. So I'm doing the easy stuff first.
That's good. That's good.
Building my
You've got a lot of material to work with.
Yeah, I hope so. One thing I do worry about is that I worry that things are going to get stale. Like it's the same type of story, or it has the same pace as another story, or it's like, oh, it's another story where this thing happens and then they end. So that's one thing I am concerned about, is not kind of having like redundancies in the storytelling, because I do see that where there's like, especially in the police, there's certain, it's a certain type of male and he's doing certain types of things. And so that is a concern that I do have, is keeping it, interesting and new for each story. So that's my big struggle right now that I'm working on, how to keep it fresh for each story.
Oh, that's great. And you do, and that each
Well, so
story
far.
is each is a standalone, but you've got to lot, like you said, you just named a lot of the departments,
Yeah.
and I didn't think about the canine unit. There's also,
Yeah.
there's men on the
Yeah.
horses,
The cavalry, the Mounties
yeah,
unit,
the mounted
um,
ones. So
and the motorcycle cops, and
yeah,
the highway patrol. Yeah, we have. Yeah, there's a lot that I didn't
it's
even think
endless.
of. Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on, I know that you come to fiction writing from academia.
Yeah.
And so I was really curious to know about that journey, how that happened.
Well, I've always been a writer. Like I wrote my first book when I was 9 years old, and I wrote it about my 2-year-old sister, because she was a personality.
Oh,
And I drew pictures in it, and I made it look like a real little book. Like I pasted it with the spine and it was a whole little. So I've always, and then middle school into high school, it was like I would write short stories and poetry just for my own. So I've always been a writer in that sense, where it goes back to my childhood days. But when I went to college and I was getting a degree in English, even though I had like this history of writing, and everyone's like, oh, you're such a strong writer, you're a good writer, all of the focus when you're going towards academic degrees isn't actually about writing the literature. It's reading literature and then writing about it. And so it was like this kind of divergent path where I was focused more on the structure of a story, or the character, the motivations, the theme, and but it gave me a really good sense of what those elements were and how to really bring those elements to the fore, how to maybe use language. And when you're reading the greats, I like to think that even though I'm still polishing, every book has more polish on it. When you're reading the greats, that does reflect in your writing. And so if I'm reading, now Diana Gabaldon is amazing, and I actually try to, sometimes I'll try to mimic her style a little bit, like, oh, this would be really good if I did it like she did it here, so I'll do that, or I'll hear a certain turn of phrase. But you can also get that from, the stories from Shakespeare, from, Jane Austen. I'm more of a Bronte sisters fan. I'll be completely honest, not an Austen fan. So
all
I'm more of
right.
a Bronte sisters fan. But, so you do get it from those. So it was a bit of like a study in storytelling and narrative in that respect. That's how I tried to look at it, even if most of my writing was academic. What I find myself doing is sometimes I'm almost afraid though that the writing seems a little too academic. Like I'll actually go through and say, I'll have someone read and say, does this sound like the way I think it's sounding? Or does this sound like I'm trying to teach someone how to do, And so I do have to cautiously temper that, so it doesn't sound like I'm writing, a graduate paper or something like that. And that's one thing that I do worry about, is that I don't want to alienate my readers because I'm using a certain language, or it's coming off like as a piece of academic writing, not a piece of fun storytelling. And so that is a bit of a concern that I have. But I think that just with the level of writing, it was just practice and polish and practice and polish. The amount of reading was, again, practice and polish. So I think it helped. And then I did a lot of like academic style writing. I've been published in a couple journals, on a couple websites. I've done some like conference presentations. And so, I had a little bit of that writing background and writing to meet a certain goal. So, and what actually happened, the reason I decided to go on this journey is I was passed over for a position 2 or 3 times at one of the colleges I teach at. And I was very frustrated, especially because the last time it happened, like I thought I had it in the bag. Like, I'm like, I did everything. It's perfect. And I thought I was getting this position. And I had started journeying into the career. I'd published To Dance in the Glen, and I was like, okay, I'll take a step back. I'll, get this position, then I'll jump back into writing. I think Lady of the Glen had just published, but I thought so for 6 months, I really just killed myself at this job, kind of trying to showcase my skills, thinking this is it. I'm going to get this, I'm so excited. And then I was passed over for the position. And this was the second time I'd been passed over. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And so I was unbelievably frustrated. Especially because I spent so many months killing myself for somebody else. And I told my husband, I think I need to stop that. And that's what got the first police story going, I'm like, nope, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to, not be around my kids and, be focused and having to sit at the computer and having to do all this work, I'm going to do it for me. If I'm going to kill myself for someone, I'm going to do it for me. And that shifted kind of everything. And that's, because academic can wring you out and throw away the empty hull. And so I decided if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do it for me. I'm going to do it for my writing. And so that's what really kind of led me up there. I've been teaching in academia for almost 30 years. And now when it matters and I wanted to really move my career forward, I'm getting rejected. I'm like, nope, you know what? I know I'm a brilliant writer. I know I can do this. I know that I can, write, and I can teach writing better and if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it for me. So that's what I did. That's why last year things really took off like gangbusters, because I want to show up the people who rejected me.
Well, their loss, our gain.
I don't know. Thank you for that.
Yes, we get great stories then.
So
a lot, that was a wonderful story. Not what happened, but at least you're very successful at your series.
Well, I'm getting, it's a slow crawl, I won't lie. And there's some things I really stink at with regards to this that I'm working on, more of the kind of, brand awareness or getting my name out there, but because a lot of times I'm focusing on how to make my story better, how I can make sure it's, cleanly edited, how to make sure I'm picking the right words or the right tone or the right. And so, and I know that's the important part of the story. That's because that's what the readers are getting, but so much pressure is put on writers to have the perfect book cover, to have the perfect blurb, or to make sure you're advertising, or to make sure you're connecting with your readers, outside of your books. And to me, that's where I struggle. I think.
That's true. And that's something that probably fans don't understand, that so much work and sleepless nights and a lot of things go into writing, that it's one of the things I think on a lot of people's bucket lists to write a book.
Yes.
But it's a lot of dedication, and it's a lot of marketing and
just kind of putting yourself out there all the time. And a lot of people who write books are a little more introverted. So, especially if you're not, I think it's amazing that you have this where you do these interviews, because that's really putting yourself out there. And so that amazes me. Like, I'm so impressed that you do this. This impresses the heck out of me. So I'm unbelievably impressed by you right now.
Well, thank you. Well, we're impressed with each other. That's great.
I know. Look at that. We'll just keep flattering each other until we feel really good about ourselves.
But it takes maybe it takes another writer to understand how much work does go into it, and how it looks like it's effortless, that success does come, but it does come sometimes with a high price, because a lot of us are working full time. I think the myth is that none of us are working, but we have our families and our obligations, and you're right, and we have full-time jobs, a lot of us. But anyway, I think you're doing wonderfully.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And that's the reason I wanted to talk to you. So last question. I was reading your bio, and as I do, and it says that you have a special love for horror and romance.
Yeah.
And your two favorite authors are Stephen King and Diana Gabaldon. And what's coming. Have you thought about combining those genres?
You know what? I don't know if I would ever be able to take the launch into horror. I did once. I actually wrote a short horror story about a girl. I wrote this when I was like 12 or 13 years old, about a girl who had, the mom was a single mom. She wasn't home a lot. She worked. Her older brother was supposed to be taken, which is funny because I don't have an older brother. So none of this was like based in fact. But she had an older brother who was mean and abusive, and very physically, and even it was starting to become sexually abusive. And so she was very angry, and she woke up one morning and she had these weird little wires growing out of her hand. And so she thought they were hairs. Like, why am I growing? So she tries to pluck them out, and, they keep coming back. And then there's always more. And suddenly it's like her whole hand is covered with these wires. And then one night, she's starting to freak out. She doesn't want to tell her mom, she's hiding it from her, her brother, she's hiding it from her friends at school. And then one night, her brother comes into the room to, assault her. And the wires like leave her hand like snakes, and they go to him and they choke him and kill him. And then the wires go away, and she only ever has the two little ones, like, as an emergency backup security device or something. If anything ever happens in the future, that's how she kind of sees it. So yeah, so that's my horror story that I wrote. And,
I smell a series.
But I really struggled with like the violence behind it. I really, and I would struggle to figure out how could you make a thriller. I mean, I've read a lot of Stephen King and he's done some pretty good stuff, but it's the horror always supersedes. Probably the closest to a romance I think Stephen King ever wrote would be his, was it 11/22/63, the one about where he keeps going back in time to try to prevent the shooting of John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And after he realizes he's not going to be able to do that, he meets a girl there. And so he keeps going back in time because he's trying to save her. And it's over and over, and it's always a disaster. And until the very end when he manages to figure out how to do it. And so that's about the closest thing to like a love story. But even then, it's still kind of at the end. It's on the periphery. So I don't know if I'd be able to do that because I'm like, okay, which would take precedent? Now, I won't lie. Book 5 of my Glen Highland romance does have a really dark part at the end. It's like almost 2 or 3 chapters where it's this very kind of thing that's going on. And it's kind of, and I'm almost like, I'm going to ask my, my beta readers, my editors, is this too much? Like, is this like too violent for, you have your happy, it's a great ending. I'm loving how the book's coming together, but I'm like, maybe this is too much. So that's my biggest struggles. I don't know if I'd be able to balance the two very well. If I decided to write, I'd probably have to pick like one primary, like it'd have to be more horror and then write it under a pen name. But yeah, I don't know. I would have to, that would take a lot of figuring out. And I don't know that I would be, and I don't know how good I am at writing horror. So I'd have to figure that out.
I think you should revisit the story you just told me because I'd like to read that one.
So, it's funny because I know I have those papers. It was typed up on a typewriter because, I was a kid. And I know I have those papers somewhere. I just have no idea where.
Story.
It was a short story. I did it like on my summer job. I worked as a temp at an office, and I used their office to type it up.
Yeah, so. Do it as when you're trying to, when you're trying to work on something, the best thing to do is to write short stories.
Yeah, to work on something else.
Because it's short, you don't have to do a whole lot to it. Less
pressure.
Yeah. So you do maybe 20,000 words, and you're good. And see, you can always give it away as a nice freebie.
That's true. It is one.
Scare everyone though. You have to do it under another name.
But yeah, so it's. I thought it was a cute story, and I could. The little wires or whatever in her hand, ended up being the hero of the story of all things instead of something creepy that takes over her life. So there was that. You have your happily ever after. So I guess technically.
Well, who knows? Maybe the wires go back in when there's somebody decent around her.
Maybe, yeah. It's like a radar or something. I don't know. But yeah. So I have dabbled when I was younger. I like right now. I don't know. I'd really have to figure that one out, but I have thought about it. I won't lie. I have thought about it of different, I saw my first horror movie when I was 5. I saw The Changeling, and I was addicted. I just could not. I read every horror, and I would read horror in any genre. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of sci-fi and fantasy unless it's got a good like horror in it. Even like my romance, I can be real picky about the romance in sci-fi and fantasy. I'm like, unless it's the romance is the primary. And like I read it was actually really well done. I was impressed. I was afraid it was going to take over too much, but it was a Highland romance, but the Scottish warrior he came from this long lineage of dragons that were dedicated to protecting Scotland. And they're not supposed to be with humans, but he ends up, the dragon was really it really only what came up minor, like the romance and the Scottish Highland was the focus. I'm like, I'm able to do this because the romance is the focus. So, but yeah, if it was in the, any genre, I would just gobble it up. So it's definitely something to think about.
Well, maybe you write outside your genre. It sounds like you have before. So
yeah,
it's always something,
jack of all trades, I guess. I don't know.
Well, as I said, always when I think I might do something, I run up a short story.
Yeah.
Just to see how I feel
That's
about it. Because committing to, 80,000 words
yeah,
to get a full book together
it's
a longer slog if you're not really sure or comfortable with the story. So, everybody, we'd love to read it. If you wrote it,
so maybe I will. Maybe I'll go back and reuse it and put it up there as like a little freebie or magnet or something. So maybe something different.
Wattpad or something. Who knows?
Yeah,
that's. Up there.
I will admit I have not ventured onto Wattpad yet. Done nothing with that. I don't. I read something on Wattpad once, but that's about the closest I've come. I haven't ventured out to Wattpad yet. So maybe that's next on my list.
Maybe you should put your next, sometimes you can put your romances or as I said, the first story. If you do that story, put it on Wattpad and see what the reaction is.
That's not a bad idea. Maybe that will be my venture into Wattpad.
Yeah. Often I've signed up and I haven't done anything with it yet. But
I don't feel so bad then.
Yeah, if I do a short story, then you're right. I'll do it under another name. Then I'll probably put it up there and just to see. Because if they're yelling at my pen name, then I really don't care.
It's like, it's not me. This is just something I was trying.
Yeah, that witch she can't write anyway.
I don't know who this person is. They're horrible.
Yeah, she can't write. Anyway, so, okay, so any final information you'd like to share with your fans?
And well, like I said, I've got a couple books coming up. I'm hoping to have like 4 or 5 come out this year, fingers crossed. I've got a lot of stuff in the works where I'm just in the process of finishing and then the polishing and editing. I've got 3 books right now. One Under the Strawberry Chase, and then one My Police, and then the Highland Romance, and then I started on the other one. I'm also working on a book with my husband. My husband wrote a book. It's part of at least as of right now, it's a 2-book series, and he wrote like the skeleton of it, and I'm making it into like a narrative for him, and so we're writing that together. That'll probably be published under his name or his pen name, though. But so I've got that coming out, and then of course, the freebie giveaway. I've got Men in Uniform in the first 3 books in a box set. So if anyone's interested in that and they want to try to win it, all they have to do is enter. They also get holiday pay as a fun little bonus. So they get all 4 books so far. So when book 5 comes out, they'll be ready to go. So if anyone wants to enter for that. And I just want to say thank you, Pax, so much. It was kind of a weird random, I love it when you kind of just randomly fall into a relationship with somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, it's a good connection. And so I really appreciate you reaching out to me initially and for doing stuff like this for authors. You're an amazing person. And I just really appreciate that I had the opportunity to meet you.
Oh, geez. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
So where can we find your books?
Well, the Men in Uniform series is Amazon only because it's through Kindle Unlimited as well. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read them for free, do the checkout for them. And then, or you can, buy them as a download to keep them if that's your preference. And then, for my Highland Romance, the Glen Highland Romance, book number 1 is right now it's available because I have it as a Kindle download as well, and I like to do promos with it, so I have that available only on Amazon. But if people want to buy the hardbound, they can get the hardbound, either through Amazon or through Barnes and Nobles. I have that printed through Ingram Spark. And then, so they can get that pretty much anywhere. But then all the other books in the Glen Highland Romance series are available everywhere. You go to Barnes and Noble, you go to iBooks, Scrivener. If you're at Amazon, you can get those anywhere. And then the Strawberry Chase, also, since this is my experiment series, I'm trying to check this out right now. That's only on Amazon under either for a download or Kindle Unlimited as well. So
we're gonna have to do another interview and just to do. Is it Strawberry Chase? You said?
The Strawberry Chase. I know.
I'm thinking we're gonna have to do
like
another one
or something for that one.
Yeah, we're gonna do another sit down and talk about that one because
Wait till I have a couple more books out for that one, though. Maybe when the
Okay.
second one comes out, we do like a release party one or
Then
something.
you
I don't know.
promise
Maybe
that
we'll do something like that.
you promise that you're going to talk to me about that then.
I
Okay.
will. And yeah, I'll send you an email about it. But yeah, I will totally talk to you about it. Talk about all the alien conspiracies that are out there.
Oh, I can't wait. So where do you hang out in social media?
Usually, I'm actually becoming more of a Twitter fan. I was really Facebook, but I'm getting a little more engagement on Twitter and, kind of having some fun with that. But you can find me at Twitter, MD Dalrymple. You can find me at Facebook, just Michelle Deerwester-Dalrymple or MDD author on Facebook. I have a page for that. I have there's a page for Strawberry Chase. There's a page for the Glen Highland Romance, and then I also have a readers group, Michelle's Marvelous Readers, and so people can check that out. That's really great if you want to like get a beta read for something, or get an arc, or that kind of stuff. Find out about giveaways. That's really a lot of good connections there. And then pardon me, I'm also on Instagram, Michelle Dalrymple author. So those are my three primary. I'm usually if I'm checking those daily. And then I do have my website. I think it's just Michelle Deerwester-Dalrymple, but that's on Blogspot. And it's also under Musings, I think is my little secondary moniker. And then I have like my newsletter sign up there. I have links where you can buy all the books. They're all little tabs on the first page. And I do like cover reveals and, info about the books and excerpts and stuff like that there. So a bunch of fun stuff.
You are such a busy author. I'm always surprised you even talk.
I work like teach at three different schools. I know everyone's like, where do you have the time for this? I'm like, I don't know. How much time was I wasting before I started writing?
Oh, you are so funny. Anyway, the recording of this interview can be found on my YouTube channel newsletter, and I'll also post it on my website. But I'll also provide the links of all the for Michelle's website and Facebook.
Thank you.
Yeah, she provided them all to me, so we're going to make sure that they're going to be there with the recording. So
Perfect.
if you need to get in touch with her or me, then you'll have that. So this has been so much fun. I want to thank you, Michelle, for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And of course, I always have too much fun talking to my writer friends, but I hope that the fans enjoy this as well.
Me too.
Okay. And so I hope that we will talk again about that next series.
Definitely.
Okay. And I'm going to end this conversation, and everyone have just a wonderful day. Thank you.